few years back, I basically trying to explain to a guy who wouldn't leave me the hell alone one of the reasons that I found him irritating. I came up with the notion of implicit solipsism. And I don't think there's anything magical about this. I don't think I'm the first person to ever notice it. Whatever. But I don't know what the hell anybody else called it. And I'd never heard it described by anybody else quite. So I just call it that. And see, normally when I make names for things, the words that I stick together, they make sense. Right? So the implicit part means that you're not necessarily aware that you're doing this, and the solipsism part means that you're acting like you're the only person in the world. Right? So implicit solipsism, it's like an unknowing behavior, as if nobody else really exists, as if you're the only real person that there is. And kind of early on, somebody saw me talking about this publicly on a public forum, and came in and they were trying to challenge me. They're like, "I don't think you understand what solipsism means." Blah 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 blah. Would it be possible for someone to have this without espousing solipsism? And I said, yeah, that's what the implicit part is. And he got really upset and whatever. I know several other people kind of in the same vein are like, viewing solipsism in sort of a classical, I feel really, really naive sense, as an explicit philosophy that someone adheres to, and they think that's the only way that it can be. I actually came over time. This was an example of such an incident, but I came over time to recognize how ridiculously correct I was. Right? So these people, one of their implicitly solipsistic views is that solipsism must be an espoused view, and if you think any other way from the way that they're thinking, you are absolutely wrong. That's just absurd. That's just absurd. Their way of thinking about it is the only way of thinking about it. So you're somehow just this, like, I don't know, garbage, or which it's notable. So like playing with the idea, it's notable that solipsism is actually its own inverse, right? So you think about it, solipsism is actually a dualism. It has to be, right? Because what's happening under a classic solipsistic view, right, is you have your mind, your experience, whatever, your consciousness, and then there's the whatever else that's like stimulating it, and you don't have direct control. If you had direct control over it, well, then it would be obvious that solipsism, strong explicit solipsism, is the correct view of the universe, because you can just control, you have telekinesis and whatever. You can just do everything, control the environment around you and the people around you, and that would be obvious. But the real situation is not like that. There is definitely at least two realms. There's you and everything else, right? And if you invert this, there's still you and everything else, right? So solipsism claims that you are the real thing and everything else is some kind of an illusion. Well, the inverse of solipsism would be that everything else is real and you're the illusion. But the effect is identical. They're indistinguishable from each other, from an experience point of view. So I thought that was interesting once I was kind of playing with it and sort of noticed that. Yeah. So there's some interesting experiences that I had, um, kind of playing with this idea, noting it in the way people behave. One of them was, so as a kid, I was in the Boy Scouts, and one of the experiences that this gave me is it was probably one of my first introductions to pedophiles, on any sort of major scale, notable daily life scale. Um, Not that anything ever happened to me, but in retrospect, looking back on it, pretty sure that's what was going on. Um, and then, of course, recently, the Boy Scouts of America have had scandals regarding pedophilia. And so, on a public forum, there was this one time where I said something like, uh, it was something about like a class action lawsuit against the OP was something about class action lawsuit against the Boy Scouts or something regarding pedophilia. And I just casually made a comment like, if anybody just goes out of their way to tell me that they're an Eagle Scout, I take that as a red flag to mean they're probably a pedophile. Because honestly, why would anybody? Nobody cares. Why are you telling me this? And then, like, three guys immediately, like, I'm an Eagle Scout. I'm an Eagle Scout. I'm an Eagle Scout. And I understand that all of them believed that this was going to me, this was going to be counter evidence. The problem is, I don't know these guys at all. I don't know anything about them. So, ironically, this just serves as evidence that, well, these three guys are pedophiles. And if you just look at the interaction from like a third party view, just why are they announcing that they're pedophiles? What are they doing? What are they doing? But these people in their heads, they're thinking, well, I'm not a pedophile. So if I say I'm an Eagle Scout, that's proof to everybody that I'm not a pedophile. That's implicit solipsism. That's an example of implicit solipsism, right? See, in reality, I don't necessarily think if you're an Eagle Scout, you're a pedophile. But this was just an interesting. It was kind of a joke at the time, but I'm also kind of serious. Like if you were in Boy Scouts all the way to the point of becoming an Eagle Scout, gross. That's creepy. You were around pedophiles a lot. That's weird. Why did you do that? Ugh. Ugh. Yeah, you might be a pedophile. There's a good chance. So, like, it was a kind of a joke, but also not really. And then these several guys, like, the only thing they said is, I'm an Eagle Scout. And I understand that they were trying to use that as counter evidence. But I don't know anything about them, so it doesn't serve as counter evidence. It just serves as them announcing that they're pedophiles in the context of this situation. Implicit solipsism. They're unable to understand that this other human being doesn't have access to their personal experiences and knowledge. That's implicit solipsism. And Bertrand Russell, actually, his criticism of solipsism involves implicit solipsism. And I always found this was interesting too, like once I developed the concept and started looking around at things. So here's a quote from Bertrand Russell. I don't know how to sound like... What is he? He looks weird. He looks like a Muppet. I don't know how to sound like a 150-year-old rich white Muppet with a pipe. But okay. As against solipsism, it is to be said, in the first place, that it is psychologically impossible to believe. So they're right there already, right out of the gate, implicit solipsism. Because he doesn't understand how anyone could have solipsistic views. He's declaring that nobody can. That's solipsistic already, right there, right out of the gate. The first sentence. It's not even all of the first sentence. It is psychologically impossible to believe and is rejected, in fact, even by those who mean to accept it. It was rejected by him, but he actually is displaying it, so. I once received a letter from an eminent logician, Mrs. Christine Ladd Franklin, saying that she was a solipsist, and was surprised that there were no others. Now this is supposed to be the punchline right there. Coming from a logician and a solipsist, her surprise surprised me. So, in a naive, classical sense, the way that the guys who didn't understand what my implicit solipsism, they don't speak English well enough to put those two words together and understand what I was saying, those guys would totally buy into this. And I get the logic, right? So if she's a solipsist, she doesn't believe that other people exist, so it's weird that she would have expectations that those other people would have beliefs at all of any kind, right? But I don't think in reality, in practice, that's how solipsism works. I think there's a confusion about how solipsism really works. Because in my experience, after thinking about this and looking around at things, once I came up with the concept, I think it's pretty much unavoidable when you're first learning something. It's just the way minds work. When you're first learning something, you're solipsistic as fuck regarding that topic, right? And the Dunning-Kruger effect is basically an example. It's showing this, right? So you get the curve, the Dunning-Kruger curve, right? The noob has extreme confidence that they know everything about this subject. That's solipsism. Think about it for half a second. They just barely learned a little bit about this thing. Okay? And if it's an adult in particular, they're going to know. Like, once you stop them and ask them and point this out, they're going to know that there are experts in this subject that know far more than they do. But, just like caught up in their own thoughts, they think in that moment that they are the most highly educated person on this subject that's ever existed. That's implicit solipsism. It's not a conscious thought. It's not an explicit philosophy that you're holding. And it's not across all subjects, right? It's not across your entire consciousness, your entire memory. It's not across everything, right? It's subject specific. So you become really, really experienced in something, and through that process, you come to more and more recognize that other people know things and have abilities that you don't have and knowledge that you don't have and things like this, right? So the solipsism in that subject gets worn away. That's the Dunning-Kruger. That's the curve. That's the curve. But that same exact person who's, pretty much an expert in this one thing, they're a total noob in something else, and they're going to display the Dunning, that same curve, right? Because it's subject specific. It's by topic, right? So you can be extraordinarily solipsistic, implicitly so, about one topic that you don't really know very well, but because you are a solipsist about it, you feel like you'll behave as if you know everything about it. Whether you, as soon as you stop and think about it as an adult, you're gonna be like, well, obviously I'm an idiot here. I don't know what I'm doing. But you're very prone to behave as if you do know everything. To the point that you'll be like arguing with professionals and experts when you're a complete layperson. You know nothing. Right? This is the thing. This is how the world works. This is how people work. And this is how babies work. Little kids. It's the same exact way. You know, a little 3-year-old kid, you just tell them one little thing and they just go around and they know it better than anybody. That's how they behave. And I think this is ultimately the source of the philosophical, like, explicit solipsism. I think this is the source of it. And I also think that someone who accepts solipsism and espouses it somewhat explicitly recognizes this to some degree or other. They see this, and this is why they're espousing solipsism. It's not a naive, simplistic, I don't think anything else exists. It's more this just recognition of human nature, and perhaps on top of that, you can add some layers that approach the sort of classical solipsism. But when you look at it this way, it's really not strange that Mrs. Christine Ladd Franklin was surprised that there are no other solipsists. It's in fact very reasonable that she would be surprised that there are no other solipsists, because this is an experience that everyone has. Everyone has this experience personally, and everyone sees it being expressed ridiculously in others. So Bertrand Russell's complaint here is extraordinarily naive, to the point that he's actually exhibiting implicit solipsism himself in his criticism of solipsism, where he says that it's impossible to believe it. Right? I find that just deliciously, hilariously ironic. See?